The glass doors of Everline Corporate Tower slid open with a soft hiss as Ava Johnson stepped inside. The marble floor gleamed beneath her worn heels, and the hum of quiet conversation filled the air. People in tailored suits moved with purpose, their badges flashing silver as they passed security. Ava took a deep breath, clutching her leather portfolio tightly against her chest. She was nervous, not because she didn't belong there, but because she knew she looked like someone who didn't. Her navy blue blazer wasn't designer, her bag was scuffed from years of use, and a strand of hair had escaped her bun on the way from the subway. She walked toward the front desk where Chloe, the receptionist, sat typing behind a large, curved counter. Chloe was the picture of corporate Polish. Manicured nails, sleek ponytail, name tag that read, Executive Receptionist. Ava smiled politely. Good morning. I have a meeting with Mr. Grant at 10. Chloe glanced up briefly, her expression neutral at first, then slightly amused. Mr. Grant? She repeated as if testing the words. You mean Mr. James Grant, our CEO? Yes, Ava said, still calm. I'm a bit early. Chloe's smile turned stiff. I think there's been a misunderstanding. We don't allow walk-ins for executive meetings. Did you maybe mean HR or the internship department? Ava shook her head. No. Mr. Grant scheduled this himself. Here's the email confirmation. She opened her phone and held it up. Chloe didn't look. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. Now, ma'am, I understand you're probably here for a job inquiry, but this lobby is for clients and scheduled appointments only. If you'd like, I can give you the link to submit a resume. Ava blinked, her patience slipping. I told you, I have a meeting. He invited me personally. Chloe sighed softly, the kind of sigh that made it clear she thought she was being gracious. Look, I don't know who told you that, but Mr. Grant doesn't take meetings with outside visitors without security clearance. Please step aside, you're holding up the line. Ava turned slightly. Behind her, a man in an expensive suit stood waiting, tapping his watch impatiently. Chloe smiled at him, a completely different smile, warm and professional. Good morning, Mr. Hayes. Right this way. Ava's jaw tightened. She stepped aside, watching as the man was ushered through the private elevator doors without a single question. When the lobby quieted again, Ava turned back. Can you please just call up to confirm? It'll take 30 seconds. Chloe gave a practiced laugh. I'm sorry, ma'am, but if I called every person who said they had a meeting with the CEO, I'd never get anything done. You'll need to leave. For a moment, Ava stood there, fighting the heat rising in her chest. She could have argued. She could have raised her voice. Instead, she straightened her shoulders, nodded once, and said quietly, You're making a mistake. Chloe smiled politely, the kind of smile that said you're dismissed. Ava turned and walked toward the door. The guard at the front gave her a sympathetic look as she left, but didn't say anything. Outside, the wind caught her hair as she looked back at the glass tower, tall, cold, and gleaming. She exhaled slowly, her expression calm again. All right, she whispered. We'll do it your way. Then she walked off toward the parking lot, the same one where, 10 minutes later, the CEO himself would step out of his car and ask the same receptionist, Did a woman named Ava Johnson just check in? The morning rush at Everline Tower had settled into a smooth rhythm. Phones rang, the coffee machine hummed, and the click of polished heels echoed off the marble floors. Everything felt orderly again, at least until Chloe saw who stepped through the front doors. James Grant, the CEO himself, strode into the lobby with his assistant Ryan at his side. His presence always brought a shift in the air, a ripple of respect and nervous energy that made everyone sit a little straighter. Morning, Mr. Grant, Chloe greeted quickly, plastering on her best smile. Would you like me to call upstairs and let your office know you've arrived? Grant didn't even glance at his phone. Did a woman named Ava Johnson check in a few minutes ago? Chloe froze. I don't believe so, sir. Should I check the appointment list? Ryan was already scrolling on his tablet. She's supposed to be here for your 10 o'clock, James. You sent her a direct invitation. Grant frowned slightly. She's not in the building? Chloe felt her stomach tighten. No, sir. I didn't have any record of... Because it wasn't a standard booking, Ryan interrupted, his tone clipped. He reached out to her personally after the Chicago conference. Grant looked at Chloe now, properly looked at her, and his expression hardened. You turned her away? The question hit harder than if he'd raised his voice. Chloe opened her mouth, searching for something that would make it sound better than it was. Sir, she didn't look like one of our clients. She didn't have clearance, and she couldn't even show a company badge, so I assumed. You assumed, Grant repeated slowly, as if tasting the word. His eyes narrowed. Do you assume every woman who doesn't look rich can't be important? The words hung in the air, heavy and humiliating. Chloe's face flushed crimson. No, sir, of course not. Grant turned to Ryan. Get security. Find Ms. Johnson immediately. She should be in the area still. Ryan nodded and pulled out his phone. Chloe tried again, voice cracking slightly. Sir, I meant no disrespect. Grant's tone was cold but controlled. You disrespected a woman I specifically asked to meet. You judged her before you even asked a question. That's not professionalism. That's arrogance. Her throat tightened. I'm so sorry, Mr. Grant. I truly didn't. Save it, he said, already walking toward the elevator. When she comes back, you'll apologize to her directly. And this time, you'll remember her name. The doors closed behind him, leaving Chloe standing alone in the echoing silence of the lobby. For the first time, her perfectly practiced smile faltered. Her hands shook slightly as she reached for her keyboard, pretending to type something. Ryan's voice came through her headset moments later. Security spotted Ms. Johnson in the parking lot. She's on her way back in. The CEO wants her escorted upstairs immediately. Chloe's heart dropped. She swallowed hard, smoothing her blouse with trembling hands. Then the doors slid open again, and Ava Johnson walked back into the lobby. The same calm expression on her face. The same quiet confidence she'd had before. Only this time, everyone noticed. The security guard straightened. Ryan approached with respect. The receptionist, who had dismissed her earlier, now stood frozen, her words caught in her throat. Ava's gaze met Chloe's for just a second. No anger, no smugness, just a look that said, you could have chosen better. Ryan gestured toward the elevator. Ms. Johnson, Mr. Grant is waiting for you. Ava nodded politely. Thank you. As the elevator doors closed behind her, Chloe exhaled shakily, her pulse pounding in her ears. The girl she had dismissed as nobody was walking straight into the CEO's office, and Chloe had just made the worst mistake of her career. The elevator doors opened to the top floor, quiet, polished, and nothing like the busy chaos of the lobby. The floor-to-ceiling windows filled the hallway with natural light, and the air smelled faintly of coffee and cedar. Ava Johnson stepped out, escorted by Ryan, the CEO's assistant. Unlike earlier, she wasn't tense now. Her expression was calm, the look of someone who had learned a long time ago that true power never needs to shout. Ryan gestured toward a set of double-glass doors. Mr. Grant's office, ma'am. He's been waiting. Ava smiled faintly. Thank you, Ryan. When she walked inside, James Grant stood near the window, phone in hand, deep in conversation. He looked up immediately when he saw her, and hung up mid-sentence. Ava, he said warmly, crossing the room. You made it. I'm so sorry for the mess downstairs. I just found out. Ava shook his hand firmly. It's all right, James. I'm used to it. His brow furrowed. You shouldn't have to be. She shrugged slightly, her tone measured. You'd be surprised how many people think they can size someone up in 10 seconds. Grant sighed. Not in this company, they can't. I'll make sure of it. She gave a soft laugh. That's one of the reasons I agreed to invest in you. That last word, invest, carried weight. Grant smiled knowingly. You haven't changed. Straight to business. He motioned for her to sit at the conference table. So, I went through your proposal last night. The Johnson Equity Fund has quite the reputation, and to be honest, your background, coming from community startups to running one of the most diverse investment firms in the state, that's exactly what we need here. Ava nodded. I appreciate that, but I didn't just come here to talk numbers. I came because your company's image doesn't match its potential. The reception I got downstairs only proved my point. Grant's expression darkened. You mean Chloe? Yes, Ava said simply. She looked me in the eye and decided who I was and who I wasn't. That's not a her problem. That's a culture problem. Grant leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. You're right, and it's something I've been trying to change. Clearly, we still have work to do. Ava glanced out the window. You can have the best products, the best technology, but if your people don't treat others with respect, none of it matters. Grant nodded slowly. Would you be open to joining the board, not just as an investor, but as an advisor on ethics and diversity initiatives? Ava looked at him, surprised for the first time that morning. That wasn't part of the original deal. I know, Grant said, but after today, I think it should be. For a long moment, Ava said nothing. Then she smiled. Not out of pride, but quiet satisfaction. All right, she said. Let's make something worth believing in. They shook hands again, this time as equals. When she stood to leave, Grant said, One more thing. The receptionist, she feels terrible. Would you mind speaking to her before you go? I think it might mean more coming from you. Ava hesitated, then nodded slowly. I'll talk to her. As the elevator doors closed behind her, she caught her reflection in the polished steel, calm, self-assured, and ready to finish what had been started. Downstairs, Chloe sat at her desk, her perfect posture now replaced with visible nerves. Every second until Ava stepped out of that elevator felt like an hour. She had no idea what she was going to say. But she knew one thing for sure. The woman she had dismissed so easily was someone she'd never forget. The elevator chimed softly as the doors opened back onto the lobby floor. The hum of conversation filled the space again, but the moment Ava stepped out, it all seemed to quiet. Chloe looked up immediately. Her usual polished composure was gone. Hands clasped tightly, lips pressed together, face pale with dread, Ava walked toward the desk slowly, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Her calm was disarming. She wasn't angry, but she carried a quiet gravity that made everyone nearby stop pretending they weren't watching. When she reached the desk, Chloe stood up. Ms. Johnson, she began quickly, her voice trembling. I owe you an apology. I didn't realize who you were. Ava tilted her head slightly. You didn't need to realize who I was. You just needed to listen. The words weren't sharp, but they landed hard. Chloe's throat tightened. You're right. I made a terrible assumption, and I'm so sorry. I thought you were... She stopped herself before finishing the sentence. Ava's expression softened, but she didn't let her off easily. You thought I was less. That's what you were about to say, wasn't it? Chloe's eyes dropped to the desk. Yes, she whispered, and it was wrong. Ava leaned on the counter, lowering her voice. Do you know how many times I've heard that in my life? That tone, that look? I've walked into boardrooms where men twice my age called me sweetheart, before realizing I ran the fund that could buy their company. It never gets easier, but it's always the same. Chloe swallowed hard, tears starting to form. I didn't mean to disrespect you. Ava nodded slightly. I know. That's what makes it worse. You didn't think you were disrespecting me because you thought your judgment was normal. For a moment, silence filled the lobby. Even the guard behind the counter looked away uncomfortable. Ava straightened, exhaling softly. I'm not here to humiliate you. I don't want your job, and I don't want revenge. What I want is for you to remember how this feels. Because someday, someone else will stand here. They might look nervous or underdressed or out of place, and you'll decide what kind of person you really are in that moment. Chloe nodded quickly, tears now streaking her mascara. I will. I swear I will. I've learned my lesson. Ava smiled faintly. Good. Then something good came out of this. At that moment, James Grant stepped off the elevator, hands in his pockets. He gave Ava a respectful nod, then turned to Chloe. Ms. Johnson will be consulting with us going forward. Make sure she has full access whenever she visits. Chloe's eyes widened. Consulting? Ava gave a small, knowing smile. Yes, I'm helping with culture and inclusion training. I figured this was a good place to start. Grant chuckled quietly. Poetic, isn't it? Ava turned to leave, but paused just before the door. Chloe, she said softly. The receptionist looked up, eyes red. Ava's voice was gentle now. People remember how you treat them when you think no one's watching. Then she walked out, calm, confident, and unshakably dignified. The entire lobby remained silent for several seconds after she left. Then the guard muttered under his breath, Guess we all learned something today. Chloe sat back down, staring at the empty doorway, the weight of the moment pressing on her chest. For the first time in her career, she realized that being professional wasn't about status, tone, or control. It was about respect. And she knew she'd never forget Ava Johnson's name again. A week later, Everline Tower didn't feel the same. There was a new kind of energy in the air. Quieter, more careful, but real. The incident at the front desk had become an open secret. No one mentioned it out loud, but everyone knew. And everyone was curious about the woman who had changed the tone of the entire company in a single morning. On the top floor, in the glass conference room overlooking the city, Ava Johnson stood at the head of a long table. Around her sat managers, HR directors, and team leaders, including James Grant, who watched her speak with visible respect. Ava's tone was calm but firm, her words deliberate. Bias isn't always loud, she said. It's not just slurs or insults. Sometimes it's a look, a tone, a pause before you decide who deserves your respect. The room was silent. People listened, not because they were told to, but because they could feel that she spoke from experience, not theory. She continued, pacing slowly. When you hire someone, greet someone, or even glance at them in the elevator, your assumptions say more about you than about them. That's what culture is, the collection of small, everyday decisions. A hand went up. It was Mark, the head of HR. Ms. Johnson, what do you suggest we actually do? We've had training sessions before, diversity, inclusion, all of it. They don't seem to change behavior. Ava nodded. That's because you've been teaching rules, not values. People can memorize policies and still treat others like they're beneath them. Real change happens when people realize that respect isn't optional. It's professional. A quiet murmur spread through the room. Grant smiled faintly. That's exactly why you're here. Ava smiled back. I didn't come to lecture. I came to build something that lasts. You have a company full of good people. They just need to unlearn bad habits. Later that afternoon, as she walked through the lobby, Chloe stood up instinctively. This time her greeting wasn't rehearsed. Good afternoon, Ms. Johnson. Ava smiled warmly. Good afternoon, Chloe. There was no tension now. Just two people, both changed in their own ways. Chloe hesitated, then said quietly, I've been thinking a lot about what you said last week, about how we see people. I catch myself now, every time I'm about to make a quick judgment. Ava nodded approvingly. That's how it starts. Chloe smiled, genuine this time. Thank you for giving me a second chance. Ava's voice was kind but grounded. Everyone deserves one, as long as they use it. The elevator opened behind her, and Ava stepped in, glancing back once. The doors closed, and for the first time, Chloe felt proud of how she'd handled herself. Upstairs, Grant was waiting outside his office. How'd the first session go? Ava smiled. Better than I expected. Your people are listening. He chuckled. You have a way of making them listen. Ava looked out the window at the city below. Respect isn't taught, it's demonstrated. They just needed to see it. Grant nodded thoughtfully. You've changed more in a week than I could in a year. Ava shook her head. I didn't change them. I reminded them who they could be.